Hi everyone, this is Satyajit. In our last videos, we discussed about how to create EC2 server in public subnet and private subnet and how to access that EC2 server. And the EC2 server is in public subnet. So and it has a public IP, so we can able to access the EC2 server from outside. But whereas the private server doesn't have any internet gateway, right? It is in private subnet, so we cannot able to access it. Okay, by this just so this see this diagram. I have a VPC. Inside the VPC, two subnet, one is public subnet A and another is private subnet A. And in the public subnet, there is a server we created public EC2, and on the private subnet we have created another EC2 private EC2. Okay, and we know like we have a create internet gateway, and that internet gateway need to be attached to the VPC A. And once that is done, and we know like once the VPC is created, by default the route table and network ACL will be created by default. Okay, and to make it separate, we created a different private route table, and the subnet we called as a public subnet. It means it must have a route to the internet gateway. Okay, so for that reason, if you see in this route table, there is a 0.0.0/0 to the internet gateway added to the routes. So now this subnet is a public subnet, and on this private subnet there is no route, so this is treated as a private subnet. Now from users, as this EC2 server must have a public IP, and once this is public IP, it has, and it created in the public subnet, so we can able to access that server. Okay, but here the service, though the private EC2 have the public IP, like if you given the public IP, one condition made, but other condition is it doesn't have any internet gateway to the route, so we cannot able to connect to the private server, right? And but within the VPC, like within the boundary, VPC boundary, anyone can communicate with each other. So to access this private server, the user must have to be connect to the public server, and from that public server, it will connect to the private server. So to connect to the private server, we must require a medium or a mediator. Okay, so that mediator is called as a jump server or a bastion server. Like here, this public server we called as a jump server, or we can call as a bastion server. That we already discussed in our last videos. And the statement which we want to conclude is that or we discussed in last time, like the public server, when we connected, we can able to access the internet. When you do ping google.com, it is working fine. Why? Because it is in public subnet, and it is in it has an internet gateway, so internet is working fine. We can able to access the internet. But though by the help of bastion server, we can able to connect to the private EC2 instance, but once in the private EC2 instance, we cannot able to access internet because private subnet doesn't have any internet gateway. Okay, so then how to do that? So how we will reserve that? Like that server should remain private, but it must contain internet. Okay, so you may ask like why, on what situation it need required? Like let's say database. So database always present in the private subnet. So now we created a database in private subnet. Now sometimes database required to update the patch. Okay, so when we require some patching update or version upgrade, right, on that situations we require internet. If the private subnet doesn't have internet, at that time we cannot able to patch the server, or we cannot able to upgrade the server, right? On that situations we must require internet. Let's jump into the practical now. Here the public server, like we created two, so one is public server, one is private server. Okay, so the public server has the public IP, right? It is the public IP, and if you go to the networking, it is in public subnet. Private server, to make it happen, like we given the public IP, but it is still in the private subnet, so we cannot able to access it. Let us connect to the public server first. So public server keys, we know, like we created the key, it is VPC EC2 testing. So from here the command is SSH-I, and I need to provide the key pair. So VPC EC2 testing, and by default Amazon Linux user is EC2 user and the public IP. Once I hit that, I need to press yes. So now I'm able to connect to the public server. Okay, if you see the IP 10.0.0.26, and here it is 10.0.0.26. So from here, if I do ping google.com, ping google.com, it will work because it is public subnet. Now I need to connect to the private subnet. To connect to the private subnet, it must have the private IP. Okay, and private server we cannot connect from outside. It can be connected within the VPC, means from the public server itself. So from here, if you see, I already copied the key last time, and I will access SSH-I and specify this key EC2 user at the rate the private IP of the server. If you specify the public IP, it is not going to work. And once I enter it, now I can able to connect 10.0.1.163. So it is 10.0.1.163. So now I'm able to access. Now here, if I do ping google.com, it is not going to work. Why? Because it is in private subnet, okay, and doesn't have internet. Now the requirement is it will remain same in private, but we can able to access the internet. So to enable that, or to make it functional, there is a term called NAT gateway. NAT stands for network address translation. So NAT gateway is a managed devices or managed service from AWS. So NAT gateway should be connected in the public subnet. So you just understand NAT gateway has two ends. Let's say if we specify on this diagram, NAT gateway should be created in the public subnet here. So here we have created the NAT gateway. And once the NAT gateway is created, this NAT gateway should be added into the route table of private. So it means here in this private route table route, we need to open 0.0.0/0. But instead of internet gateway, we have to use NAT gateway. Okay. By the diagram, if you see, we have to create a NAT gateway, and NAT gateway need to be attached to the private subnet route table like that. So NAT gateway having two end, on another way we can say. So it has two end. One end should be connected to the public and another end should be connected to the private. It means NAT gateway must have to be created into the public subnet. Okay, and NAT gateway, once it is created, it must to be whitelisted into the private subnet route table. Let's do that. So we need to go to the VPC. And inside that VPC, there is, if you see the right hand side or your left hand side, it will be NAT gateway. So you need to create a NAT gateway. So you can just give a name. Let's say private NAT gateway. Okay, private NAT. So now select a subnet. It is saying which subnet. So now, as I said, NAT gateway must be created into the public subnet. So you need to select the public. So which subnet? Now public. If you do private, it is not going to work. So you have to create public subnet. Now public subnet. So connectivity is two types, public and private. We'll discuss more into latter point of the what is private, but now we require public. So now it's public. Now it's saying elastic IP. So NAT gateway having some elastic IP. So what is elastic IP? Elastic IP is a public IP. So in AWS, there are three types of IP. One is public IP, one is private IP, one is elastic IP. So public IP, it means using the public IP, we can able to access the server publicly. Private IP means any of the server has some private IP, whatever the subnet range or whatever the VPC CIDR which you provided, it will dynamically give one IP, that is private IP. Elastic IP means elastic IP is also a public IP, but it is given by the Amazon side. Okay, it is not randomly. So public IP also Amazon side, but that is not static. So when you say static, any of the server, if we do stop and start, okay, once the server is in stop and when we start it, okay, the public IP is going to change, but the elastic IP will remain static. Like if you do stopping and starting, and if you do rebooting also, the elastic IP will remain static, but the public IP is dynamic. Okay, it means now whatever the public IP I got it, if I do stop and start, right, the public IP will change. Okay, so that's the reason it's elastic. We will discuss more until later point of time. Now we need to allocate. So there is no elastic IP, right? We have to allocate an elastic IP. Now it got an elastic IP, and that's it. We need to create a NAT gateway. So it will take some time to create a NAT gateway. By that meantime, I just created the NAT gateway. It means NAT gateway is created in a public subnet. Once the NAT gateway is created, the NAT gateway need to be whitelisted into the private subnet route table. So we need to go to the route table. You can directly go from here, or else you can just do subnet And which subnet? Private subnet and private subnet route table. Click on this route table, select that, go to the routes, edit routes, add a route, and we need to open 0.0.0 instead of internet gateway, put as NAT gateway. And this is NAT we just created, and save the changes. Once that is done, we need to wait for some more time. The NAT gateway should be in available state. Okay. By that meantime, I'm just pausing the videos, and once it is come up, I will be online. It took 2 minutes of time to be the status should be available. Now the NAT status is in available state. And if you go to the command prompt, if you can see the ping response, it was working fine. The communication is happening. Okay, once again, I will stop it. And now this is my private IP is 10.0.1.163. If you go to the EC2 instance, and check the private IP, and there is a 10.0.163. Earlier the ping was not working. If you do now ping google.com, it will be working. Why? Because now we have added a NAT gateway. You can double check, like if you go to the networking, go to the subnet, private subnet, and in the private subnet route table, if you go to the route table, and there will be a route added now 000 to the NAT gateway. Okay, but in the public subnet, if you go to the public subnet, right, which is this much, this one, and go to the route table, here 00 are, but it is internet gateway. Okay, so now we verified, like our server is in public our server is the private. Okay, that also you can just verify. You can just pick the private server public IP address, and you can just exit it. Now I'm in local terminal. If I'll do SSH-I same key EC2 user @IP, it is not going to work because it is remain private. Now it is remain private, but still we can able to access the internet. Okay, so in this video we discuss about what is NAT gateway and how to create the NAT gateway. And NAT gateway having two end, one is public end and private end. So here the troubleshooting steps will sometimes the NAT gateway will not going to work. So in that, you just go to the NAT gateway and verify NAT gateway is created in which subnet. So NAT gateway should be created in the public subnet, then only it will work, because NAT gateway will sync the internet from the public and given to the private. So NAT gateway must to be connected into the public subnet. Okay, and okay, that's it for this videos. And if you have any questions or any queries, please ping into the comment box. I will help you out. Thank you for watching my videos.